Alright, here is my Think Aloud for the piece I will be looking at called Momo Iro, which is a piece for solo pan or solo steel drum. This one's for lead pan, which is just a single steel drum. And it's written by Andy Akiho, who's a newer composer. He writes lots of pan music along with music for other instruments such as other percussion instruments and wind instruments. Okay, cool. So as I open this up, sometimes pieces have performance notes on them. So that's usually the first thing I look for, so I get an idea of what I should be looking for in the piece. This one doesn't have any, so I'm just going to skip that portion. So we have the title, Momo Iro, pink, which is the synesthetic color he thought fit with this piece. And we have the composer, and the instrument, and it also shows the range that the instrument should be in, so that you have all the notes, because most pans are similar, but once in a while they'll have fewer notes than others depending on how they're made. Pan isn't necessarily a standardized instrument yet, so. Okay, so we have the tempo marking, and it says andantino, which means more of like a walking kind of tempo or maybe a bit slower. So we have the half note equals 86 to 92 beats per minute. So this is something you would either have to have a general idea of how this sounds, or you could pull out a metronome and try to figure out how fast that is. So it's going to be about, so that's about the tempo. And it says the half note is going to equal this. And so now I'm going to see if when I see this half note, I'm thinking, oh, this must be in cut time, most likely, because usually this note shows, usually they base the tempo off of what the main beat is in the measure, and since it's a half note, it's probably in cut time, and I was right. So it has the C with the slash in it, which means cut time. I'm going to look at the key signature, and there's 4 flats, so most likely it's in some sort of A flat major, but it might not necessarily mean that, because there's other key signatures with these amount of flats, but the main deal is that I know that these are there's 4 flats, and then as I read the piece, I'll start to make a judgment on what key the piece is actually in. And then there's also this naturally shape the melodic lines with subtle dynamics throughout. So I think that's more just saying, as you play the piece, just do what you feel it should naturally do regarding the contour and how you build and decay from phrases. Okay, so before I actually, normally I would try to either kind of sing through this or I would try to play through it and sight read it. But before I do that, I'm just going to kind of skim through some things. Sometimes they refer to like checking out the roadmap when you read music and just look for key things, which would be like repeats or DS, al coda, dies al fine, or things like that. I don't think this piece has that, but those are things you would look for. And then maybe just some like significant changes. So I'm just going to skim through. So we have some dynamics, mezzo piano, then this little crescendo, mezzo piano. So that looks pretty similar. And then it looks like this little phrase repeats a lot, or it's at least relatively similar. We have the same shape, so there's going to be some repetition in this piece. Another crescendo. It looks like there's a lot of like repeating measures. Then here's that little swoop again, like before. Okay, and then we have another dynamic change. Okay, so I'm going to flip the page, and this section looks a little different than the last one. We have these accents now. And as I look at this, because of how they grouped the notes, these top 2 notes that always stay the same, they always group those together. But then the bottom note, they wrote out separately rather than like drawing these all together under one beam. I'm going to assume that they want these two things to sound like two different voices. So when I play this piece later, I'm going to have to think about which one I want to bring out, which one I don't. They also have accents on the groups that have the top two notes. So maybe he wants to bring that out more, but I'll figure that out as I play it. So anyway, B flat, slightly louder than E flat in top voice. So he's referring to the top two notes. And because of the nature of the pan, when you go up higher on the scale, you really have to play out the notes more because they don't speak as clearly as the bigger notes or the lower ones. So I'm not surprised for him to say that, just because of the nature of the instrument to begin with. But then maybe he just wants that top voice to come out more. So I'll have to remember that when I'm playing it. Okay, so then so this little motive seems to repeat again as well. Then we have some chords and things like that. So now something like this means like these are like all one voice, because they're all beamed the same rather than this where they're beamed differently. So we have some chords. Now it says slightly swung eighths, so it might not be too crazily swung, but maybe just to show a bit of a different style. So I'm going to assume the rest of it, the style is relatively straight. We have this line, and then once again we have this repeated motive that we had up here, so that's just more repetitive things, the same chords for the most part. And then this looks familiar. We have that swoop again in the contour, so I'm going to assume that's at least something similar to what happened previously on the first page. That all looks about the same. And then we get to here, and this looks very similar to the top again. It has those accents, the two voices. So I'm going to assume that's at least something similar. When I go back, sometimes they'll make things slightly different than the first time, so there may be slight nuances between notes, but I won't know that until I actually read through it more. But I'm going to assume it's relatively similar. It even has this slightly swung eighths again with some kind of line. Now it's that same thing with the accents and the two voices. So now we've got this big pause. So this, I feel like now that there's this huge pause, I feel like this is going to be a drastically different section, or it's going to be a significantly different section. So it looks like right now the main sections I've found are the one that appears on that first page where it has this kind of like swooping line, and then I think the next theme would be the one with the accents and the two lines. And so now I'm going to say this is the third theme that's really heard in the piece. So it starts out really, really quiet, and it just came from a decrescendo, so this is going to be very subtle. So since it's a new section, I'm assuming they're going to want to build it eventually, so probably as we go through this, it's going to build a little bit more. Not necessarily the whole thing's going to say piano. Strum like an acoustic guitar. So I'm noticing that, I think this was in some of the other parts too, but he sometimes puts these little notes on the staff where the heads aren't as big as the other heads on the staffs. So I'm going to assume those are somewhat like ghost notes, or notes that you don't necessarily hit as hard as regular notes. So you kind of feel them, but they're not as deliberate as regular notes. You can hear, and seeing him say like strum like an acoustic guitar, I can understand that now, because a lot of guitar players strum, and then certain notes are really emphasized, and then they'll kind of keep other notes going, but they're not as emphasized as some of the other ones. So that makes sense. So we just have these chords. It looks like it's just a lot of chords. It looks like it's somewhat similar. This is really the first thing that's not necessarily a chord. We've got this little run. More chords again. But now we're starting to get a couple lines. So I'm going to assume that they're just adding more to this riff. So they'll go to the chords, and then they're adding something different to replace the chords that they had before. And we're going to keep going. That kind of looks like the same deal. As I learn the piece, I'm also going to pay attention to what notes he has accented, so that I'll know which ones to bring out. There's a slur here, so that's probably important. So that's kind of all one idea. And then when I get through this, then we have that main theme again. Here's that swoop, like from before. So this is all kind of similar to the beginning. It all looks really similar to what I read earlier. And then we have some rolls at the end. And there's a ritardando, so it means it's going to slow down. So this is probably going to be drawn out, especially because it's the end of the piece. And then we have our last roll. So probably as a musician, we would take our time doing something like that rather than playing it in time. Okay, so that's kind of the gist. As I read through the piece, I would try to pay attention to those things along with playing all the right notes and things. So, okay, I guess that's it.